Well, we are live in California now with Erol Morkoc, a senior Republican spokesperson. Let's jump into this feud between former ally, that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, good to have you this weekend, Erol Morkoc. What role do you think the Jeffrey Epstein files play in this feud, and how might their release impact U.S. politics and international relations as a party spokesperson?
I think the Jeffrey Epstein files are probably the crux of the straw that broke the camel's back for Marjorie Taylor Greene. She, is a very emotional person. The way that she approaches things has been, very avant-garde, very aggressive. But I want to give you a little bit of an insight. This is kind of a scoop on the back end, on the internal Republican polling. We found that she was going to get crushed by Democrat John Ossoff by nearly 20 points. And President Trump contacted her privately, respectfully saying, looks like you're not going to win this election. She then came out and doubled down on all of these policies that then sort of made it seem like she was much more antagonistic to President Trump than I think she wanted to be. And the fact of the matter is that she's not reelectable. And that's why President Trump has decided to distance himself the way he did. The Jeffrey Epstein scandal absolutely is something that's contributed to Marjorie Taylor Greene's passion for this, especially as she is, of course, very dedicated to the survivors of sexual assault, and a vocal supporter of that. And keep in mind, she's somebody who has been considered by Trump as a friend and a patriot for a long time. But ultimately, the bigger story here that isn't being talked about is she's not reelectable, and that's ultimately why this has been done.
So I wonder what the party is doing with regards to that, because a lot of expectation is that there might be internal party crisis within, the Republican Party.
Yes, and there is a big tent in the Republican Party, and we have a lot of diverse opinions, much more than on the left. There's very scattered plots if you look at the data plots for ideological differences in the Republican Party. Now, this is healthy as long as we are able to solve these differences between elections. Losing those races in the last governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey, that looked bad for us, but we were supposed to lose those. But the infighting is something that we shouldn't shy away from. It shows that we're a real party. The Democrats haven't had a primary since 2008, and we have all of the power, and we still have debate and discourse and disagreement. It shows it's a real party, but it also shows that it's not completely unified, and this is a really good opportunity for the Democrats to seize on this opportunity going into 2026.
I'm wondering, you're saying seize the opportunity for Democrats. I mean, that is totally opposed to what I think you would say. But let me go into the Epstein files now. Why is Trump, so opposed to releasing the Epstein files, and what does he have to hide? If there's anything out there that he's not, involved with, the Epstein whole saga and drama, why not, just let the White House release the files?
I think that there's a multifaceted way to look at it. And I'm not trying to run interference for President Trump. He can speak for himself. But in a couple situations I've noticed when he was very upset responding to a reporter asking about the Epstein files, the clip that went viral, why are you guys still talking about this? Well, at that time in US politics, there had been 16, 17 girls who had been killed in a flash flood, and he was doing a press conference for that. That audio clip traveled immensely, and it made it seem like President Trump dismissed the Epstein files as though that they were a conspiracy against him. And I think in many ways he feels that they're being used to overshadow the achievements of his administration. Ultimately, Donald Trump appears in the Epstein files being talked about as Epstein hates him, Epstein thinks he's a dangerous person, and Epstein fears that he would out him. About some of the stuff regarding the FBI. The FBI has come out and said that Donald Trump was actually a confidential informant against Jeffrey Epstein back in 2018, giving for his first trial. Also, Donald Trump brought up Epstein's Island in 2015. So a guilty man, somebody who's ever associated with it, wouldn't bring it up in this way. He never went to the island, unlike Larry Summers, unlike Bill Clinton, unlike a lot of very important people, Prince Andrew. And ultimately, he feels that the distraction is a hoax. And I think that ultimately this has been a bad public relations push by the White House by not making that message clear. Because as these messages come out, you see that everybody in these messages, there's not a single thing implicating Donald Trump doing anything wrong. And anybody who's been around or anything who's talked about it, including Jeffrey Epstein, said he never had any idea. He never came into our island, never was part of that. And so I think ultimately it exonerates President Trump, but President Trump's personality and the way he deals with it ultimately has drawn it back on him in a Streisand effect. It's been a little bit of a misstep by the administration, but President Trump is completely innocent, and that is what vindicates him completely over all of these other people who actually did interact with Jeffrey Epstein and actually did go to his despicable island.
You see, that's the reason why a lot of people, I mean, a lot of staunch supporters of Trump would, they're clamoring for, the release of the Epstein files so that once and for all, that Trump is actually innocent. But then what implications, since you're a party spokesperson, what implication does this rift have for Republican Party's internal dynamics and its chances in the 2026 midterm elections? You mentioned earlier that it's a good opportunity for Democrats to, hop in and take advantage of this. And it's surprising.
Right. I would go back to that sentiment because ultimately the nuanced, complex explanations that anybody wants to give about, I mean, in America, if you're legally in a situation, you're being legally investigated, they investigate you and you did nothing wrong. They said you're completely innocent. Well, your name's in those files. And so in our court system, these files are sealed to protect people's innocents who were investigated. If you release the files, all those names will be leaked. Myself and most Americans say, so what? Do it, even though it's not in the legal cards. But in the way elections work, in the way midterms work, it doesn't matter what the law is. It doesn't matter if I sit here and give a logical explanation. It matters that the files weren't released. Donald Trump's admin, Pam Bondi came out with that binder. I've got the files that are on my desk. We're going to release them. This was a mistake by Pam Bondi. But again, that doesn't matter. Pam Bondi is not running for election. Donald Trump's surrogates are in 2026. And absolutely, Democrats are going to latch onto this, use it, and try to use it to deliver their message. And honestly, they're going to be very, very successful because it's a soundbite 3-second clip media cycle for the people who aren't going to listen to this long form program. For your educated listeners, sure. But for regular people busy going through their day, they're going to see the headlines, the sound bites, and they're going to go with that. And that's why I think this is a great opportunity for Democrat strategists to seize on it and take advantage of our bad messaging.
So how do you respond to critics who say Trump's attack on Green is a sign of weakness and division within the Republican Party? I know you've acknowledged that there is some sort of a back and forth in the Republican Party, but what do you say to critics who say that's, this is a weak sign coming from, Donald Trump?
I would push back on the complete ideology that a weak president would be somebody who keeps their mouth shut. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was loyal. She was there for me. Even though she's going to lose this next election, I'm going to, be okay with that. Well, he's the party boss. He's the head of the Republican Party. And ultimately, in the end, he's not the whip, but he's the one who's going to drive these results. He's going to barnstorm on the campaign trail in 2026 because the party without Donald Trump right now is not strong enough to win elections with Trump as the president, because you can't run as a non-Trump Republican as is being shown. And so what I really think is it shows the strength of the Republican Party and our willingness to change out people who had been, and that's a very Trumpian thing to do, by the way, in business. You're as useful to Donald Trump until the minute you're not. And in sports with professional athletes, they're the first to tell you you're as good as the last game you played. And when you live in that high stakes, high results arena, Marjorie Taylor Greene eventually wasn't able to deliver for the president in terms of bringing in those votes. And that is why we had to ultimately remove her from the situation. Is there a path back for her? I don't think so. I think she's burned enough bridges. But on a personal note, I don't think she is an evil person or somebody who wished bad on the Republican Party. She overlived her usefulness and she got a little bit too big for her britches, we say, a little bit too arrogant towards the situation. She doesn't realize that President Trump is fighting a 10-dimensional warfare. We have a border that has been shut down, so many incredible achievements by electing President Trump, and to nitpick him on one or two small things while he's running this great global game that eventually crossed a line, and she needs to respect his authority. She did not do that. And the next person who comes in hopefully will, because right now it's Trump's party until the end of his term. And like it or loathe it, that's the situation.
So are we saying now, Erol, that she is currently out of the party, out of the way as a candidate for Republicans? Is that what you're saying?
It's a really interesting moment. We're in that eye of the hurricane right now where will she try to hang on? Does she have enough financial support? Will there be potentially an attempt to primary her? Or will she see the writing on the wall that already again, we have the secret poll behind the curtains, internal politics of the GOP. We proved that she has almost no chance of defeating John Ossoff, who is a very strong candidate, a very much more moderate guy, than Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was a tremendous candidate in her window of opportunity. But politics change, winds of time change, and ultimately we're probably going to have to move on from her. And she'll probably make a very good career in the media because I think she has a lot to say and a lot of really good opinions, even though they might not be aligning with the goals of our country right now.
Now, let's talk about her safety. I mean, as we talk about this, you've talked about how passionate she is. I've talked about even your relationship with her. But do you think Trump's criticism of her has contributed to the threats she's receiving? And should he take responsibility for his words? Should the Republican Party be concerned about her safety? And would they provide her the adequate protection? I mean...
Yes, it's a very valid question. And any time in today's political theater when any rhetoric is used that is beyond hello, there is negative press to the point of exhaustion. So in this situation, Marjorie has described that she has received some threats from people. Being called the traitor, obviously, is something that probably hurts her feelings. And, there are people out there who are going to act on these things, as we've seen with the murders of Charlie Kirk or other prominent people who are killed by evil people who act on impulses. Now, she is a sitting member of Congress. She does have good security. The president doesn't wish any harm upon her. And I think that nobody in the Republican Party would like to see anything happen to her. So I'm sure behind the scenes, any security she needs, she's guaranteed congressionally. She also is very, very successful, her and her husband, in their private lives. So they have the ability to do that. But it would be improper for me to say that the threat on her life hasn't increased marginally if we're doing it on like a poly market, but directly, no. I don't think President Trump telling Marjorie Taylor Greene, somebody who the Democrat Party doesn't like at all, and somebody who a lot of people in the Republican Party are kind of done with, to move on. I don't think that that's put her life in risk. If she comes out and she keeps pushing and going and trying to do public events and these kind of things, then that increases her exposure. But currently, if something happens to her, I wouldn't put it on President Trump. She has said a lot of inflammatory things. She knows what she does. She's a grown woman. She's a very smart, tough cookie, as President Trump has said about her before. And she'll be able to weather this storm and go to the next phase of her career, which is probably not going to be with our party.
Right. Thank you so much, Erol Morkoc. She's a senior Republican spokesperson. We had to jump on the Trump and Marjorie issue there. Appreciate you for the time.